The day had started like any other at the magnificent Kensington Palace. The late autumn sun was struggling to break through the London clouds, casting a soft gray light over the historic walls where royalty had lived for centuries. Inside the private apartment of the Prince and Princess of Wales, there was the usual morning bustle. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was moving through her morning routine with the grace and efficiency that the world had come to admire. She had already helped get her 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, ready for school, sharing the school-run duties with her husband, William. Despite their wealth and status, mornings in the Wales household were grounded in normality. Breakfast was eaten together, uniforms were checked, and the children were encouraged to be independent. After the chaos of the school run subsided, the palace settled into its quiet, daytime rhythm. Catherine had a busy morning ahead. Her private secretary had briefed her on the schedule, a meeting with her patronage of a children's mental health charity, followed by a video call regarding her early years development project, and then a private working lunch. For a member of the royal family, there were rarely moments of true downtime. Even a quiet moment with a cup of tea was a luxury. By mid-morning, Catherine retreated to her private sitting room, a space decorated in soft, neutral tones with personal photographs and fresh flowers adorning the tables. It was her sanctuary within the sprawling palace. She sank into a comfortable armchair by the window, letting out a small sigh as she looked out over the manicured gardens. There was a soft knock at the door, and a young, friendly-looking footman entered, carrying a delicate porcelain tray. "Your Royal Highness," he said softly, placing the tray on the low table beside her. And on it sat a pristine white teapot, a matching cup and saucer, a small jug of milk, and a silver teaspoon. The aroma of freshly brewed Earl Grey tea filled the air. Catherine smiled warmly at him. "Thank you, James. That looks perfect," she said, her voice calm and appreciative. The footman gave a slight bow and retreated, closing the door quietly behind him. Catherine glanced at the papers on the table, mentally preparing for her first video call. She reached for the teapot, and the fine china warm against her palms, and poured the steaming amber liquid into her cup. She always let it cool for a minute or two before adding a splash of milk. It was a small ritual she cherished. A brief pause before the demands of the day consumed her. She picked up the cup, the scent of bergamot rising with the steam. Just as she was about to take her first sip, there was another, more assertive knock at her door. Before she could respond, the door opened to reveal a broad-shouldered man in the crisp, dark uniform of the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. It was Sergeant Alistair Finch, the lead protection officer assigned to her personal security detail. He was a man in his early 40s with a stern but not unkind face, and eyes that seemed to miss absolutely nothing. He had been with the royal family for over 15 years, and was known for his meticulous nature and an almost sixth sense for danger. Catherine looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Alistair, is everything all right?" Alistair's eyes weren't on her. They were fixed on the teacup in her hand. He took 2 swift steps into the room. "Your Royal Highness, please don't drink that," he said, his voice low, calm, but carrying an unmistakable urgency. Catherine froze, the cup halfway to her lips. She looked from his intense face down to the tea, then back again. "What is it?" "I need you to put the cup down, ma'am." Very slowly, he instructed, moving closer. Puzzled but trusting him implicitly, Catherine carefully placed the cup back onto the saucer with a soft clink. Alistair immediately leaned down, his face hovering just inches from the surface of the tea. His eyes narrowed, scanning the liquid with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of Catherine's neck stand up. The steam from the tea drifted up, and Alistair's nostrils flared slightly as he took a subtle, careful sniff. And he wasn't smelling the tea for its aroma. He was smelling it for anything foreign, anything chemical, anything out of place. "Alistair, you're starting to worry me," Catherine said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "What have you seen?" He straightened up, his jaw tight. "There's a slight residue on the surface, ma'am, a faint, almost invisible film. It's not consistent with standard tea or the milk. It's catching the light in a strange way." He gestured to the window. "Oh, the way the light hits it, you can see a very faint, oily sheen. It's barely perceptible, but it's there." Catherine looked at the cup. To her, it looked like a perfectly normal cup of tea. But she knew Alistair. He wasn't a man prone to flights of fancy or paranoia. His job was to see the things that ordinary people missed. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a cold trickle of fear seeping into her stomach. "Who brought this to you?" Alistair asked, his tone now purely professional. "James, the new footman," Catherine replied. "He's been here for a few months. Seems very pleasant." Alistair nodded slowly, but his expression didn't soften. He pulled a small, high-intensity LED torch from his pocket, a tool he always carried, and shone the focused beam directly onto the surface of the tea. In the bright white light, the sheen became unmistakable. It swirled lazily on the surface, a kaleidoscope of thin, oily colors. Invisible to the naked eye in normal light, but glaringly obvious under the torch. It looked like a tiny drop of oil or some other non-water-soluble substance had been introduced. "Ma'am, I need you to move away from the table," Alistair instructed, his voice still calm but brooking no argument. He was already pulling a small, sterile evidence bag from another pocket. "Don't touch anything." Catherine rose from her chair, wrapping her cardigan a little tighter around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite the warm room. She watched as Alistair carefully, as if handling a bomb, picked up the cup and saucer together, holding them level. He placed the entire thing inside a large evidence bag, sealing it carefully. The cup that had been a symbol of comfort and routine just moments ago was now a piece of a potential crime scene. "We need to get you to a secure location within the palace while we sort this out," he said, his eyes scanning the room for anything else amiss. I'm also going to need you to tell me everything you've eaten or drunk this morning and everyone you've been in contact with." Catherine nodded, her mind racing. "Just breakfast with the children and William. Then some water, that's all." "Right. This way, ma'am." He guided her out of the sitting room and towards an internal room that was considered a safe haven, often used for drills. As they walked through the private corridor, Alistair was already speaking into the small microphone hidden on his cuff, his words a low, rapid stream of code and instructions that would mobilize a team of specialists across the palace. Within minutes, the quiet morning at Kensington Palace had been shattered. The tea, the most quintessentially English symbol of comfort and civility, had become the center of a terrifying mystery. The atmosphere in Kensington Palace changed in an instant. The quiet, the orderly rhythm of the day was replaced by a silent, focused intensity. Word traveled through the private channels among the staff, not in panicked whispers, but in a hushed, tense urgency. Something was wrong. Something involving the princess. Sergeant Alistair Finch had not panicked. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. After ensuring Catherine was secure in an inner room with another protection officer he trusted implicitly, he immediately set two parallel plans into action. The first was the protection and forensic analysis of the evidence. The second was the containment and investigation of everyone who had access to the princess's private tea service that morning. The sealed teacup was placed into a specialized evidence transport box. Alistair personally handed it over to two officers from the Metropolitan Police's Forensic Services Directorate, who had arrived at a discreet back entrance within 20 minutes. They wore plain clothes and carried nondescript black cases, but their movements were precise and professional. The evidence was whisked away to a high-security laboratory in London. where it would undergo a battery of tests: gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, toxicology screening. They needed to know exactly what that faint, oily sheen was. Back at the palace, Alistair set up a temporary command post in a small administrative office, commandeering a desk and a phone. And his first task was to track the chain of custody for that cup of tea. He called in the palace operations manager, a veteran royal staffer named Margaret who had served the family for over 30 years. She was pale but composed when Alistair explained the situation. "The tea service for the princess's private sitting room," Alistair began, his notebook open. "Walk me through the process, from the start." Margaret, her voice only slightly unsteady, explained the rigid protocol. And the tea was kept in a locked caddy in the main palace kitchen. Only senior kitchen staff had the key. That morning, a specific blend, Earl Grey, the princess's favorite, had been requested by her personal assistant. It was prepared by the under-butler, who had been in royal service for 8 years. The pot was warmed, the tea was brewed for exactly 4 minutes, and then it was placed on a tray with the cup, saucer, milk jug, and sugar bowl. And that tray was then handed to the footman on duty for the private apartments. Today, that footman was James Buckley. Alistair listened intently, making notes. "And James Buckley? He's relatively new?" "Yes, about 4 months," Margaret confirmed. "He came with impeccable references from a private estate in Oxfordshire. He's been very diligent, very well liked by everyone, including the young prince and princesses." "Where is he now?" Alistair asked. "He was in the main dining room. I'm setting up for a lunch service," Margaret replied. Alistair nodded to another protection officer, who immediately left the room to locate James Buckley. They needed to speak with him, but not in an accusatory way. Not yet. They needed his account of the morning's events. However, when the officer reached the dining room, James Buckley was nowhere to be found. A quick search of the nearby areas, the pantries, the staff corridors, the locker rooms, came up empty. The young footman had vanished. This changed everything. What was a precautionary investigation became a full-blown manhunt. Alistair ordered an immediate lockdown of the palace grounds. Gates were sealed, and all staff were asked to remain in their current locations while a roll call was conducted. Officers with radios fanned out, searching the gardens, the courtyards, and the staff quarters. 20 minutes later, the roll call was complete. Every single member of staff was accounted for except one, James Buckley. In his locker in the staff changing room was found open and empty. A check with the front gate security revealed that a young man matching his description had hurriedly left the grounds through a pedestrian gate about 15 minutes after Alistair had confiscated the tea. He had shown his staff pass, mumbled something about a family emergency, and walked swiftly toward the High Street Kensington tube station. He had a significant head start. Meanwhile, in the secure room, Catherine was trying to maintain her composure. She had been joined by her private secretary, who was frantically making calls to reschedule her canceled appointments, and her press secretary, who was already drafting statements in case the news leaked. Catherine's primary concern, however, was not for herself, but for her children. Were they safe? Alistair had already assured her that the children's school had been alerted, and that their own protection detail was on high alert. William was on his way back from an engagement in London, his car racing through the city streets. Catherine sat in a plush armchair, a cup of untouched water on the table beside her. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly, but also a profound sense of violation. Her home, her sanctuary, had been breached. Someone had tried to harm her, not with a bomb or a bullet, but with a quiet, cowardly act, slipping something into her tea as if she were a character in a historical drama. And the mundane had become menacing. She stared at the closed door, waiting for answers, waiting for Alistair to return with news, waiting for her husband. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of police radios crackling in the corridors outside.